Joffrey had moves. That was awesome. Still a little bit of white people clapping. Well, I don't know about you, but it's a little hard for me to believe that it's almost Easter. And it'll just be here in 2 weeks. We'll do Palm Sunday next week, and then it will be Easter. But it also means that we are now contemplating giving up some things and taking in some new things, and we have quite the list, right? So over now, it has been, 5 weeks, or today is our 5th week, we have been thinking about what we could give up so that we could make room to take in new things and more expansive things. And today we will tackle giving up perfection and taking in vulnerability. And the lesson for us today around this, ironically, is wrapped up in one sentence that you heard read this morning. So as we listen for a message in just that one small sentence, let's pray. Holy Lord, we give you thanks that you've been here all morning with us, that you are stirring and you're working within us. And so I pray now that the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts might rise up and greet you, and that you will be pleased. May it be so in your many names. Amen. Amen. Some years back, Ray Charles was doing some concerts in Atlanta. Bob Costas, many of you know him as a newscaster, and his cohort on the news were talking about these concerts. Apparently, Ray Charles was doing a concert back-to-back days, and Bob Costas had attended both of them. And he was talking to his co-anchor about the experience of going to this Ray Charles concert. And what he said was, every time I hear him sing, I just feel like I'm transported to some other place. And he said, I heard him 2 nights in a row, and when he sang his classic Georgia, he said, I was just moved to tears listening to him sing, even though the first night sounded a little different than the second night did. Didn't always sound the same, but he said, I was so transported by listening to Ray Charles sing. The co-anchor said to Bob Costas, yes, I really get what you're saying. He said, some folks feel the rain, others just get wet. But Ray Charles feels the rain. I feel like that sentence, some folks feel the rain, others just get wet, embodies our focus for today. Giving up perfection and taking in vulnerability. Perfection has a way of causing us to see the rain as something that just gets us wet, while vulnerability invites us to feel the rain. You know what? In either case, it's raining. But when you get wet, and that's all you do, then you just simply see the imperfections of your hair, or your clothes, or the way it stops traffic. That's what it means when you just get wet. So as we think about that this morning, let's also think about where we pick up this story of Jesus in the wilderness, this story that we've been working with all through the season of Lent. Today we find Jesus after he has survived 3 temptations. Those temptations have been delivered up to him by the tempter. And then the story comes to a very abrupt end. And that end is one sentence. When the tempter had finished every test, he departed until an opportune time. Has anybody ever preached on that sentence that you've heard before? We sometimes skip over this one, but it is pretty packed if you really think about it. When the tempter had finished every test, he departed until an opportune time. When I hear this sentence, what comes to mind to me is Arnold Schwarzenegger saying, I'll be back. I'm particularly taken with the words, at an opportune time. To me, this sounds like a very intentional threat from the tempter. I'll be back. I'll be watching, and I'll be waiting, and at an opportune moment, I'll catch you when in some strange world, you are doing something that causes you to be compromised. And I'll be watching and waiting. In order for this sentence to speak to us, I think we have to unpack it just a little bit. There are a few things there that are worth our consideration. In some strange world of our own making, we have set up theological belief systems that, in my mind at least, twist us up and leave us with quite a snaggled view of God and the tempter, as it turns out. So in this story, it's easy to walk away from and say, yep, there goes the devil again. Not the red one with horns, right? There goes the devil again, waiting on Jesus and us to mess up or have a weak moment, and then he will pounce on us and trip us up. You've heard that, right? Here's the weirdest part, though. We also are often tempted to see God in exactly the same way. You hear me? The God who is waiting on us to mess up or have a weak moment and will then punish us. Have you been taught about that God? This may be the way the idea of perfection got set into motion somewhere along the way. I think that's just pretty twisted up. Essentially, we can get seduced in assigning the same attributes to both God and the tempter. Isn't that twisted up? Right after that, we get led down another path. The path that God is testing us when challenging things happen to us. Another thing that we also attribute to the devil. The one who makes bad things happen if we aren't careful. Do you hear this? They are assigned to both God and the devil. So what I'm saying is both God and the tempter have been used to scare us into being perfect. And listen to this. According to the American Psychiatric Association, the number one way that perfection is put into motion in children is when parents or other important role models withhold their love when children aren't perfect. So look how this stacks up. We may have received messages in childhood that suggested God was watching for us to mess up, and so was the devil. We may have received messages that Jesus was human in all ways just like us, but perfect, not like us. And then perhaps parents or other role models withheld love from us when we weren't perfect. When all of those things come together, it's easy to see that perfection is the thing we strive for. It's little wonder that perfection is a thing that we want to find in our lives. Because after all, we want God to be proud of us, we want to be like Jesus, and we want to get love from our parents and others. So there is perfection. Unfortunately, there is another logical conclusion that comes. And that is a perfect God that lives way off out there somewhere, who is waiting on us to mess up, or who's waiting on us to get so much better before we can actually be connected to that God. In many ways, that God is so perfect that God is someone to fear, because we're not perfect. At best, these are confusing messages about God, Jesus, and ourselves. These are the messages that come when perfection is used as a way to keep us in line, or scare us, or shame us. So while it's not always an easy notion, it's a good idea to give up perfection. Don't you see? I'd like to ask you to think about something with me this morning. And let's see if we can get all of that sorted out and have a better understanding in the end. The words, an opportune time. When we think about the tempter, an opportune time means catching us being less than perfect and then cutting in to make it worse. But when we think about Jesus, inopportune time appears to signal exactly the opposite. It appears with Jesus that it signals that he is about to enter those moments of imperfection and walk with us through. To me, this suggests that Jesus is ready to enter our lives when we are vulnerable in some way, not when we are perfect. There's some examples of this with Jesus. Remember the promiscuous woman at the well, who never expected a Jewish man to give her the time of day. But Jesus sat right there with her while she gathered her water all alone. To Jesus, this was the opportune time. This was the time to sit with someone others didn't want to be with. It was a time to talk to her and see her as someone who was worthy of his love and his attention. It was an opportune time to give her water, the water that would help her live. Then there was the leper, who was accustomed to people not wanting to be around him and certainly not wanting to touch him. But when Jesus met him, he wasn't afraid to touch the leper. He wasn't afraid to be with him. He wasn't afraid to see him as a person and sit and talk to him. He didn't see the leper as a freak. It was an opportune time for Jesus to take the leper right where he was and offer him the kind of healing that comes when you are noticed, spots and all. These stories are endless when it comes to Jesus. And they are the stories we should carry in our hearts always, I think, because if we would, we'd be reminded that wherever we find ourselves, even in the most broken times of our lives, Jesus sees that as an opportune time not to judge us, but to sit with us and love us. There's nothing quite like the people in our lives who stick with us, are there? The ones who, no matter what comes, no matter what the ups and downs, are the people who stay with us. There's also nothing like looking back on something that at the time seemed so horrible and so awful, and there was no way you could think of to explain what was happening to you. But down the road a little bit, you look back, and all of a sudden you start to see, right? Oh, I see. I see what I learned. I see the people who came along in my life that probably wouldn't have otherwise. Oh, I see. That brought me many gifts. I see. That brought me some love and blessing in my life that I didn't have before. My friend, Reverend Elder Don Eastman, once said, if you walk with God long enough, those moments in your lives that you could not understand when you were going through them, if you walk with God long enough, it will be revealed to you. That's the kind of God that we believe comes into our lives in those moments that we are broken open and sits with us and loves us. We see ourselves as weak in those moments. I want to suggest to you today that Jesus sees them as us being vulnerable and open to his presence. About 7 years ago, I had a really horrible illness that just about killed me. This was one of those moments, at least so far in my life, that was just the worst of the worst. It was a very, very hard time. I wanted to speak about this story today because my mother is here. And I wanted to say this because in those months where I was at home and not doing well and really struggling, my mother sat with me every single day. She sat right there with me, and she fixed eggs and cheese every way she could think of because it was the only thing I could eat. And she never quit trying to find a way. And she never once went anywhere except sitting right beside me. I was as vulnerable as anybody could have ever been those moments. But she sat with me. She was Jesus to me in those days. She took me in a vulnerable place and didn't make me feel weak, just made me feel loved and cared about. I think that's what vulnerability is supposed to teach us. Because on the other end of the spectrum, perfection creates a divide. It creates judgment and distance. Vulnerability connects us. It connects us like grits. Because you can't just have a grit. It's a package deal, grits. And then if you add cheese, it's even more wonderful. But vulnerability connects us. It not only connects us to each other, but it connects us to God, because we realize that even in the hardest times, God is with us and shaping us and molding us. To me, the takeaway from this story is that wherever you find yourself in life, it's a very rich place to be, even if it doesn't feel like it at times. There are lessons there. And there will be people who are connected to you forever. I just think that perhaps the most poignant story that I've ever heard that would illustrate this is about Horatio Spafford, who penned the hymn, "It Is Well With My Soul." I don't know if you know this story or not, but it's such a perfect illustration for what we're trying to learn today. Horatio was a wealthy man in Chicago. At the turn of the century, his 2-year-old son was burned in the fires that happened in Chicago and died. As Horatio was trying to deal not only with his son's death, but also because of the fires, the loss of much of his wealth, he and his family had planned a trip on a ship over to Europe. Because he was dealing with all the financial things that had happened because of the fire, he told his 4 daughters and his wife to go ahead and get on the ship and go ahead and he would follow. In a few days, as he was about to get on the ship, just before he went to take sail, he heard from his wife, Anne, who said, "Our ship sunk. All 4 of our daughters were killed. I survived alone." Horatio got on the ship and began his voyage to Europe. And it was during that time that he penned the words, "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, you have taught me to say, it is well with my soul." In the middle of great grief and loss, Horatio Spafford allowed himself to feel the pain, to be vulnerable. And what welled up within him was this song that has blessed millions over and over again. But I'll bet there's a part of the story you've never heard, which is really more amazing. Later, he and his wife had 3 more children. And unfortunately, another one of them died of scarlet fever at the age of 3. The church they attended turned them away because they said this loss was a punishment from God. This is what you heard me trying to untangle in the beginning. But this is a punishment from God. He and his wife and the kids that were left, they got on another ship and went to Jerusalem. And they started something they called the American Colony that eventually involved many traditions of faith, Muslims, Jews, other Christians. And they spent the rest of their life with people from different faith backgrounds, running soup kitchens, hospitals, and orphanages. The Staffords, through a lifetime of being broken, open, and vulnerable, seem to understand something that the rest of us would do well to understand. That when people are in places that compromise them, that break us over, that is the time to be with them. It is in those moments of vulnerability that God comes to be with us, and so we go to be with people. To sit with them, to love them, to notice them, to care about them. The staffers were present. They were there. I think they understood that even though they'd been rejected from their church, they still understood the power of God to be present. To be present, not off out there somewhere, waiting on us to get it right, but a God who is in the middle of the storms of our life. Right in the middle, helping us to figure out how to get through the storms. So as we travel toward Easter, I pray that we will open ourselves up, not close ourselves off. Because the miracle is in broken places where God resides. And when we receive those miracles, then we become the miracle for others. Today, right now, let's decide once and for all that we are not perfect, but at an opportune time, we are miracle makers. May it be so. Amen.